What lies ahead for the country? David Lynch is a journalist and author of the book When the Luck of the Irish Ran Out, detailing the country's economic road from rags to riches and then back again. He explains the lessons Ireland can teach the rest of Europe and the U.S. and whether the country's luck may change again.
And it is a good news, bad news story. You know, the Irish, like all the other European economies, have weathered a very tough 4 or 5 years. They were out in front, I think, of most in terms of taking the medicine they had to take on the fiscal side to try and get their government budget back in order. But on the economic side, as a consequence, it's been very disappointing, just crawling forward, still very high unemployment and very high immigration.
But Ireland is unique because it was one of the first Euro states, so to speak, to take the medicine, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. Do you think it was a success in what the EU did for Ireland?
Well, the Irish developed their own medicine in the fall of '08 in the depths of the banking crisis, and they did something that was quite aggressive, and I think in retrospect people think was probably overly so, which was guaranteeing the entire banking system, including the failed rogue bank, Anglo-Irish Bank, which was probably not systemically important and may not have needed that guarantee. As a consequence, they, the Irish taxpayers, have borne an enormous burden, and that has been sort of the key issue in Ireland that they've had to whittle away at. They're still hoping, the Irish government's hoping to get some relief from the EU in terms of forgiving some of that debt, but there's not much good news to report on that so far.
The title of your book, When the Luck Ran Out on the Irish, are you referring to the luck of the citizens or the luck of the politicians?
Certainly, if you look at, as I do in the book, at the long sweep of 25 years in Ireland, when Ireland went from one of the poorest economies in Europe and really a backwater to, by the late 1990s and then into the first decade of the 21st century, a global star of the fastest growing economy in Europe, richer than their former colonial masters in the British Isles, and a real success story culturally. There was peace in Northern Ireland for the first time in hundreds of years. So Ireland was really riding a boom. And then that all went awry in the latter part of the first decade, 2007, 2008, 2009. The banks got ahead of themselves, made loads of dumb loans. Society as a whole sort of ran amok. And as a consequence, the Irish bust was every bit as impressive as the Irish boom, and they're still trying to climb their way out of the wreckage.
What's the takeaway for other parts of Europe when they look towards Ireland? What has gone right?
Well, I think what's gone right is that the Irish were pretty early to recognize the fact that they themselves were guilty of some errors in judgment and policy, and they tried to rectify that with what have become now a series of austerity budgets, 6 austerity budgets in 5 years with quite real cuts. You know, here in the United States, we're now going through a sort of Washington shadow dance, arguing over the so-called fiscal cliff, and we haven't done a heck of a lot of tightening yet on the fiscal side. We've done some, but to put it in terms that would resonate with an American audience anyway, if the United States did what Ireland has done over the past 4 or 5 years, we wouldn't have a $1 trillion budget deficit. We'd have a $1 trillion surplus.
Let's talk about the economy in Ireland and its relationship to the rest of Europe. What's the economy like now after the medicine, and how are they contributing to the European economy?
Well, you know, they're still trying to figure out how to replace all the jobs and the growth that the housing sector constituted back in the heyday. And it was out of control. It is now a shadow of its former self. The good news is the export sector, where all the multinational companies, many of them American, many of them in the high-tech sector, that's ticking over quite nicely. Exports are up.
I mean, that's a real positive.
That's a positive, no question. But the question is, where are you going to get job growth? Unemployment's still almost 15%, and that doesn't include the 80,000 a year who are leaving the country to go elsewhere.
Ireland did take the medicine. Their unemployment rate did come down, albeit very slightly. Mm-hmm. It doesn't sound like it, and it doesn't appear that it's going to get better anytime soon for Europe.
Well, it's going to be marginal, grinding progress. And the problem from the Irish perspective is that even if they do everything right, they're still a very small economy on the periphery of a larger continental economy. And they're dependent for real growth and prosperity on what happens in Europe and what happens in the United States. And until both of their major trading partners are growing at a robust clip, there's only so much you can expect out of a 3.5 million, 4 million population economy.